Well, I think it's about firstly putting the priority first. In terms of family policy and child policy, we've got to put the child first. What does the child need? And then subsidize that, or rather put the money to the child so the money can follow the child, rather than just put it in external care so that the mother can work. And maybe say for the first couple of years, that's a time where the environment is really important for the child. And even for the poor or disadvantaged families, helping the mother to mother or the father may be more, a better way of using the money in the longer run.
Anne Fennell, what a joy it is to talk to you again. Thank you very much for joining us. And you're going to talk to us today about a very interesting report which you have published, or your organisations have published along with Civitas. You are, of course, president of an organisation called Mothers at Home Matter. And first of all, I love it. I think all organisations should be called what they are because it's very clear what you stand for by the name of your organisation. But you're also president of a European equivalent, and it's that European equivalent, I believe, which with Civitas has published an important report. Tell us a bit more about that organisation, a bit more about the Civitas reports, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So a few years ago, I was asked to become president of the European Federation of Parents and Carers at Home. I've been chair of Mothers at Home Matter for about 10 years now. And I'm doing very similar work at a European level. So across different countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and we've been to the United Nations, and we work in with the European Women's Lobby, and we've attended various meetings with academics, lobbyists, with ministers in different countries, and we ask a very simple question. What evidence is there that pushing particularly babies or very young children into daycare for long hours, what evidence is there that this is good for the child? And we haven't been able to get a reply from anyone. Nobody seems to know. I think the best we've had is that it's not bad for children. And so we wanted to put together a conference where we could really just ask that question. Is the policy, where we're extending childcare, and we're doing it in the UK now, extending childcare to babies for quite long hours. Is this the best start for babies? Is this good for children? And a few years ago, I met James Heckman, who's the Nobel Prize winner for economics. We met him at one of the Hungarian conferences. And the Heckman curve is often used to justify early intervention and sort of daycare. But what he was saying was really interesting. He was saying, intervention is useful, and it does provide a return later on in life. But what kind of intervention? And he was talking about actually helping mothers mother. And for the same sort of outcome, for like a fraction of the cost of these experiments, they were doing some quite big experiments in America, spending like £20,000 per child. But for a fraction of cost, helping a mother, you had very similar outcomes. And the other thing he said was, and if you look at the studies, these big studies of, they're often for children of the age of 3 and upwards, and they're very specifically targeted to very disadvantaged families.
That's right.
And so you see that there is some advantage in intervening. And the other thing that is never brought out in these reports is within those studies, there's also a weekly visit where the people go into the home and help the parent to parent, and that's not really ever brought out. So what we're doing across Europe and in the UK is removing the child from the mother, or forcing the mother to go into the work. We're taking away that relationship. We're not supporting that relationship, and the key is to get mothers into the labour market. So our incentive, the intention behind our policy is not the well-being of the child, it's the benefit of the labour market.
Yeah, and I think, there's so many points you've raised there. I think the policy about getting mothers into the labour market is not a conspiracy. It's explicit from the government's perspective. They've said it's all about increasing GDP.
Yeah, and tax returns.
Yep.
Also, they say, I think it just, being at home is economic inactivity. Whereas if you're working, it's seen as growth and productivity.
Yeah. So before we come on to what the people who support the policy might say, actually, the numbers are shocking. Over 9 billion we're spending on government supported childcare. You mentioned the idea of 30 hours of it being available from 9 months old, and there are reports indicating that it comes out to about, the government will pay a provider per child per year around £14,000 if you use the 30 hours. Those are eye-watering figures.
That is, yeah, for a child under 2.
But you can see from their perspective, in terms of GDP, you can either have a mother at home bringing up a child, or you can have a mother working and contributing to GDP, plus then the GDP at £14,000 per child per head, multiplied by how many kids are in each nursery, on top of GDP as well to look after. So from the government's perspective, it's a no-brainer in terms of getting the GDP numbers up.
I don't think so, because I think 75% of women are already in work. You're not going to get a huge amount more women in work. You're subsidising the people who are already working. I don't think their GDP is going to go up much further. I also think that actually, in terms of a lot of women are on low pay. I don't think the tax receipts are going to be that high. I don't think it's a no-brainer. I think it's actually very badly advised, and I don't think they're going to see the productivity results. And plus, in the long term, if this does negatively affect children, that's going to have an effect on GDP and on the economy. And also, if you have unhappy mothers and sick children and
You're absolutely right. And in fact, if you do the sums, well, if the tax man is paying $14,000 a year for 30 hours of childcare, you need to be earning about £65,000 a year in order to pay that $14,000 back in tax, in terms of the exchequer breaking even. Well, that's unlikely, let's say, for the numbers that we're looking at and the sorts of work that mums generally look for when they're going back to work while they're having children. So that's quite interesting in and of itself. There is this other argument, of course, Anne, that, well, look, as you mentioned, mums are going to go back to work anyway because they can't afford the cost of living. They can't afford the cost of housing these days. So you need two parents working. So the government's just being very kind in saying, we understand that, let's take some of the strain and pay for childcare.
Well, you could use that 9 billion. We could use that and ask and give it and say, well, what's in the best interest of the child? And you could redistribute that. So you could give women or parents a real choice. Would you like to look after your child yourself? Would you like to maybe have a grandparent look after it or a childminder? And in those first 2 years, it is really important. It's a critical time for brain development and emotional security. And actually somewhere which is less stressful, which is a more homely environment, be more advisable, really. And so you kind of have to start from the child, what's best for the child, and then give more options, because at the moment the only option is external childcare and childminders, although I think it's becoming harder for them to operate too.
Yeah, and I think the report says actually it's about choice. It's not about saying mums can't go to work; they have to stay at home, and it's not about saying mums who are at home have to go to work. It's about saying, look, here's your choice. And maybe actually, if we divided that number, that 9 and a bit billion, up by the number of children, you could say to mums, here's 10,000 a year to spend on childcare the way you want to.
Yeah,
it
wouldn't even have to be that much, even if it was a fraction of that.
You can keep it, or you can give it to your parents to help with childcare, or in fact you can pay an external provider to provide childcare. And I think the report says that's a method whereby it doesn't cost any more, but it actually gives people choice.
Yeah.
And it means that it may mean, in fact, in the interests of children, that some mums then become able to stay at home and look after their children.
I think the other thing also is that the childcare industry is already at crisis. It's already in crisis. They can't actually, haven't got the staff. They haven't got the buildings. It's not a job that people particularly want to do, and you're replacing good care at home with mediocre care, because universal childcare is just something that would be too expensive to provide high quality with. And then if you do provide people a choice, then those who really want it might get more options or a better place. You might free up the market to have more spaces for those who really want it. Or even at the moment, the other problem with childcare is that the smaller family-run nurseries are closing down. They can't afford to survive. And the bigger for-profit ones, where they have bigger ratios, are the ones that are taking over. And they also don't want to be in poorer areas, so that poorer areas are losing out.
When I wrote about this recently for Coalition for Marriage Supporters, it's quite interesting because I had some very positive messages back, and I had one particular very, very angry message back saying, "How dare you tell me I should pay my taxes so some lazy woman can sit at home with her children?" Our economy is built on revenues received from people who were once children. And who were raised by their parents at no cost to the state. So let's not forget that. And you also talk about the other disincentives. In fact, you mentioned yourself the idea that families aren't taxed as families, they're taxed as individuals. And that has all sorts of effects on child benefit thresholds and everything else like that, which again I think the report touches on. And the report touches on international comparators. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so just starting on the tax, we have a very unfair tax system to families, particularly if you're married. I think you wrote in your report, didn't you, about £7,000 worse off on the same income if you're married than if you are apart. So it sort of doesn't encourage you to be together. And like I said to you, the reason I joined Mothers at Home Matchman was because I realised that we were better off dropping our income by £15,000 and going on to tax credits.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive on every economic and social and common sense method. It doesn't make any sense.
But I think the other thing, for my husband who's providing for me and for my children, if he tries to earn more, he hits a higher tax threshold, he hits a loss of child benefit. So for every extra pound, he loses sort of 70p of that, because at certain incomes you hit various cliff edges. He can only bring home 30p for every extra pound he earns, whereas if I go out to work and I'm earning under 12,500, I can bring back every pound for every pound I earn. So it makes more sense for me to work, even though I've already got a job looking after the children. So I mean, we really need to, I think, lessen the tax on families. What we're doing is we've got a fairly high tax. It's not the highest in Europe, but we also give a lot back in benefits. So I think almost half of all families are on some sort of tax credit, universal credit. So we could reduce the burden on families on tax and not have to try and subsidise them with benefits. And actually, people are more free to spend more of their own money rather than rely on the state. So that would be one thing which would be good. Across Europe, so the different countries, Hungary is quite a good, although they've just changed their government. They provide a loan for families for starting out in terms of housing, because obviously that's a really big issue. And if you have 2 or 3 children, that loan either disappears or reduces. They have a very generous, you can either stay at home or go to work. You get subsidised, I think, between 2 or 3 years. Then they also have a fantastic tax alert. So once you've had 3 children, you don't pay tax when you go back to work, and that's the same in Poland. So we could reduce the tax on families. In Finland, they have a home allowance. In Germany, also, they have a home allowance as well as subsidised nurseries. I think it's a choice that we're really looking.
Yeah, a choice, isn't it? And also just to recognise that actually you can raise the best version of the next generation, or you cannot. And that actually has implications on the GDP going forward. You know, some would argue we have a conveyor belt of broken kids going into school at the moment. You know, the school readiness report, etc. Schools children unable to read, to use the toilets, to interact, to speak in many cases, because they've been institutionalized effectively way too early. And the results are being seen in school. And I know some of the evidence from 3 and forward and some of the groups that you've been talking about, the groups that need things especially, interventions can help, but actually, as you say, if you look at the population as a whole, there's no evidence that this is doing anything other than harm for the children. I'm worried we don't give the message to single mums, to other families on low incomes who've got to go and work because they simply cannot earn enough to pay the rents. That's not what this is about.
No,
it's about choice, and it's about...
Well, I think it's about firstly putting the priority first. In terms of family policy and child policy, we've got to put the child first. What does the child need? And then subsidise that, or rather put the money to the child, so the money can follow the child, rather than just put it in external care so that the mother can work. And maybe say for the first couple of years, that's a time where the environment is really important for the child. And even for the poor or disadvantaged families, helping the mother or the father may be more, a better way of using the money in the longer run. I mean, so when we looked at the school readiness reports, I think it was something like 80% of children were out of nappies by 18 months. We're talking about in the 1970s, and most mums were at home then. And now 75% of mums are in work, and we've got I can't remember the figures, something like 40% of children in nappies or something.
Something like that, yeah, something crazy like that.
But
it's a problem up and down the country.
I mean, nappy changing is something that takes, potty training is something that takes quite, time.
Yeah. It's not something primary school teachers were expecting to do.
I think the other thing is we're losing confidence in our own parenting abilities, and we think that school or the teachers, it's their job.
Yeah.
Or quite, we don't believe in ourselves, or we don't really know how to do it, and we don't see our parents do it. We don't see, we're not in big families, so we don't see like aunts and uncles and children.
And that's another whole conversation, Anne, which we probably haven't got time for today. But when was the last time you saw a baby in a supermarket?
You don't see.
When was
don't see.
When was the last time you saw a positive image of childbearing on the media? All you read is stories about, I regret having my children, it was so hard and you think, well, hold on, actually it's statistically the happiest people in the world are married with children. You don't hear that on the media, and you think, well, why is the message not coming out from government that actually this is a really good idea? It's the best way of bringing about the best version of the next generation. I know it's not possible for everyone. I'm an example of how it wasn't possible, but where we can, we should nudge towards it. And so, final question, Anne. We've got an election coming up. Some would say it's in a year. It's probably more like 3 years. It seems that we're not going to get a lot of traction with the current government on these matters. I mean, while your report is wonderful, it's like another report saying the same thing, and so what? But for the manifestos of governments, of those who would be in government, if you like, in 3 years' time, what would you say to them that the country needs with respect to this? Come up with a couple of policies that they can take from you and use to improve the country and improve families.
Yeah, I would say a fairer family taxation, reduce taxation on families generally, and particularly take away the penalties on single income families, and let the money follow the child. And so there's a real choice for families how they choose to care, putting the needs of the child first. So let's get some research as to how these long hours affect babies, particularly babies from 9 months to 2 years. That there are different development stages. So let's get the research out. Let's really have a conversation about what is best for young children, and then find a way of letting the money follow that, and giving parents real choice. Because I think one of the hardest things for mothers, particularly, you're with this baby for up to 9 months, and suddenly you're having to tear yourself away, and it's heartbreaking, and you're feeling like you're not doing a great job either working or being able to be a mum at home, and it's actually quite painful. So I think it's necessary to really look at how we deal with this.
Yeah, and let's get a hold of whoever in the Treasury just thinks that GDP is everything, and let's talk about gross wellness product and not just gross domestic product, shall we?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Although
Brilliant.
They're very hard to persuade, the Treasury.
Marvellous, yeah. Anne Fennell, as always, an absolute privilege, and keep up the marvellous work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.